Hey everybody, you probably, like me, spend a ton of time in your kitchen, standing right here in front of this kitchen sink, using water out of your kitchen faucet. And there's few things that can be quite as frustrating as a kitchen faucet that doesn't work very well, or, as in my case, makes fun noises, gets stuck so it's hard to use, and in general, just isn't a very nice thing to have in your home. So in this video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to upgrade your kitchen faucet. Let's get started. As I've mentioned, this faucet has a few issues. It's a pretty basic builder-grade faucet to begin with, and while it looks pretty nice, over time it has developed enough little problems that we are ready for an upgrade. Here's the faucet I'm going to be upgrading to today. It's made in Germany by a company named Wasserwerk. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I'll leave a link to this down in the description below. We really like this faucet for a couple of reasons. First, instead of having the hose that pulls out of a separate receptacle, normally, this part here would kind of separate and let you pull the hose down, the whole thing can just flex and move around wherever you want it. And that's both the style that we were looking for, but also it's going to simplify my installation because I'm only going to have a hot and cold hose to hook up. There's not a third center hose that I have to mess with, and the weight and all of the other things that you'll see me remove when I pull out the old faucet. Now, this faucet comes with everything you need to do the installation. It's got a little box of extra hardware here. Some of this I will be using, some of it I won't, and I'll point out where and why when I get to that point in the installation. I'll also point out that this and pretty much any faucet that you buy should come with pretty decent installation instructions. The ones with this faucet are excellent, and it looks like it's going to be a very easy installation. Replacing a faucet typically does not require much in the way of tools. I'm only going to need to use this screwdriver to remove the old faucet's mounting hardware, and then this adjustable wrench to disconnect and then reconnect the water lines. Additionally, it's a good idea to have a few things on hand to help deal with water. Some kitchen towels like this, and a small bowl like this are especially helpful to deal with cleaning up any messes or catching any water that drains out of the faucet. Additionally, I like to have some eye protection on hand because you'll be working under the sink and looking up at that faucet as you drain some things, and your eyes are going to be in the splash zone. This project starts, of course, by opening up the cabinet under your sink and taking everything out of it. Once everything's removed, before I start crawling around inside here, I like to just get a damp rag and wipe things down, as things tend to get a little bit dirty down here. This is also a great opportunity to check for leaks. You can feel along the underside and bottom of all your pipes and make sure that there's nothing leaking. You can also look for telltale drips underneath anything, under the disposal or under your traps or anything else, and just check out your plumbing generally to see how things look. Everything looks pretty good here. I'm just going to wipe this out so it's clean, and then we'll get going with removing the old faucet. All right, we're getting into the meat of her now. When you get down here, don't start to panic when you see this somewhat dizzying array of tubes and braided and solid and a cable that's electrical, and it's really actually pretty simple. There's really only two fittings that we care about down here. The first, of course, is the cold for the sink, and the hot for the sink is the second. Those are the only two we're going to need to disconnect. Now, your plumbing might look very similar to this, but it might look substantially different. For instance, over here I have one that is completely capped off and not used. This is a not softened cold. I have a water softener here in this house, and the cold and the hot that feeds our sink uses softened water. Additionally, I have an extra hot over here that goes to my dishwasher. Now, in many cases, the dishwasher actually comes off of the same hot that goes to the sink, and in lots of those, it's just like a T or a different sort of a fitting where you can turn off the sink independently from the dishwasher. So in this case, I don't need to touch the dishwasher shut off at all. As I mentioned, there are only two shutoff valves that we need to worry about here today. The one is for the cold for the sink, and the other is for the hot for the sink. And I have traced these to make sure that they go up to the faucet. This definitely goes to the cold side of the faucet. This definitely goes to the hot side of the faucet. So I'm certain that these are the two shutoff valves I need to use. You may notice I've got two different styles, and that's because of some prior plumbing activities that have already occurred down in this cabinet. I had to replace something once, and I couldn't get the same style that the builder put in. So this is actually the more common style you'll probably run across in your plumbing. And these are operated by just turning it 90 degrees clockwise to turn off the flow of water. So this is now in the off position. These are operated by pulling this out. So you just grasp it and pull up like that, and that has now turned off this shutoff valve. Don't try and twist these, that doesn't actually do anything at all. So if you run across this kind, you pull them up to turn them off, or you pull them away to turn them off, and you push them back in to turn them back on. With the shutoff valves turned off, I can come back up to the faucet and try and turn it on both on the hot and on the cold side, and notice that no water flows at all, so I've definitely turned off the water to this faucet. So we can now go back under the sink and start to remove the hardware that is holding the faucet in place. Different faucets come with a variety of different mounting hardware. It would be basically impossible for me to try and explain all the different mounting systems that different faucets use, but in my case I've got this brass collar here that is threaded onto these threads, and then it's held tightly in place with these screws. And so to remove it, all I need to do is remove these Phillips head screws, and then I can unthread the brass collar. There is a screw on both sides of the collar. So one tip I can give you is, before you start this job, research the mounting system that your faucet uses so you have the right tools prepared beforehand so that you don't get hung up on this particular step. Once those screws are loose, this collar should have just been tightened down by hand, and it's relatively easy to just reach up there and twist it off the bottom end of the faucet. The only really hard part about this is figuring out how to route your hand and your arm through all the different plumbing so you can reach up there. In order for me to completely remove this brass ring, I'm going to need to disconnect this center hose. This is the retractable hose that the faucet uses when you pull it out. And now to remove this, it's just got this blue clip here that you push off. And when it pops off, be careful it doesn't fall down and hit you in the face. And then before you disconnect these hoses, it's a good idea to have a towel handy, because we are probably about to get ourselves a little bit wet. And with that blue plastic thing removed, these hoses just pull apart. But again, your sink might be different, so look up the model number of faucet that you have and check your installation and deinstallation instructions. Okay, I'm holding that towel up there because I have removed that, and this is full of water, so I'm going to put the end of it into my towel as I pull it down so that it doesn't spray water all over me. Alright, with this hose disconnected, I've grabbed a little bowl from the kitchen here that I can use to collect any drips, and this hose in particular has this weight on it that's used to help retract that hose when you pull it out on the sink. We can go ahead and slide that down and off the end, and then just put this out of the way. Now we're ready to disconnect the water lines themselves. To do that, I'm going to start with the hot side. I'm just going to put the towel down underneath where the fitting is, just in case there's any drips, and then use a crescent wrench to very gently disconnect these. These should not be very tight. You shouldn't need much pressure at all on your wrench. Once you've turned it just a couple of times, you should be able to reach down with just your fingers and spin the fitting free. Then I'll move my rag. It looks like that's dripping a little bit. You can see the rag's turning a little bit dark from the water. Move this over into my bowl to collect the water, and I can move the rag over to the cold side and disconnect that next. And the cold side is done exactly the same as the hot. We'll put our towel down underneath it, put the wrench on just to break that fitting open, and then we should be able to just spin it with our fingers. Typically you will get a few drops of water out of these, but the vacuum from the faucet being closed will help keep the water in the pipe so it doesn't drip much. But I am still just going to aim that into that bowl. You can see I've got the 3 lines that came off the faucet. They're now going to drain down into that bowl. So I'll come up here up on top and I'll open the faucet. And water should immediately start to drain out of all 3 of those down into the bowl. With everything all disconnected now, I should be able to reach up and slide this brass installer ring down past all those fittings and all the way down the water lines until it's completely removed. Okay, we should be ready to remove the old faucet. Everything's disconnected. I'm just going to put this towel down here to catch any last drips that come, and then we can go back up top and pull the faucet out. With the old faucet removed, now is an excellent opportunity to inspect our hole, make sure there's no damage, and also to do a little bit of cleaning, such as removing these water deposits before we install the new faucet. And now we're finally ready to install the new faucet. This starts by just feeding the water lines down through the hole and placing the faucet loosely in the hole, approximately where it's going to be seated. Now there are some specific instructions I'm going to go over for this specific faucet. Your instructions may differ, so consult your owner's manual. One of the items that this faucet comes with is this little spacer here, and this is intended to be mounted underneath the countertop. But you only need it if your countertop is less than 35 millimeters or about 1 3/8 inches thick. Mine is just at 35 millimeters, so I'm going to leave this out. But bear that in mind, if you buy this specific faucet and you have a little thinner countertop, you will need to install this piece. I can gently let this faucet sort of lean over like this on the hole, and then I'm going to go back underneath the sink and continue with the installation. I now have a small silicone washer that goes over both of the water lines, followed by a metal washer, and then followed by this large nut. And this is the only installation piece that is going to secure that faucet to the countertop. I don't need a wrench or any other tools. The instructions specifically say just to thread this up and then get it nice and snug by hand, and that's all it takes to install. For this step, you might find it useful to get a helper to go and hold that faucet up straight to make it a little easier to thread this thing on. Okay, the instructions say to get it to where it's just snug, and then you could go back up top and make sure the faucet is aligned exactly the way you want, and then we'll come back and tighten this up. Back up top here, the faucet is not quite lined up, so we're just going to rotate it around so that it's lined up exactly the way that I want. I want this part here to be perfectly parallel to this backsplash. That looks pretty good. Now I can go down and tighten it all the way. Now I'm not really a fan of this mounting system. There's pretty limited space under the sink, and I could not really fit my hand around the mounting hardware and get it very tight. The faucet kept spinning around and coming out of position up top. I did eventually manage to get it tight enough, but it was more of a struggle than it should have been, and this is just something to keep in mind if you choose a faucet with this style of mounting hardware. Now we can connect our water supply lines for our faucet. Make sure that you connect the hot to the hot and the cold to the cold. Thankfully, these have been labeled to make this job pretty easy. These don't require very much force. Spin them on by hand until you can't anymore, and then use a crescent wrench to give it about another half turn or maybe 3/4 of a turn. And that should be all it needs. With those fittings reconnected, we're ready to turn the water back on. I'm going to start with the cold, and before I do, again, I'm going to put a little towel underneath it just in case there's any leaks, and I'm going to turn it on slowly, going counterclockwise, just a little bit at a time, just to make sure that there's no big leaks. And then I'll feel along the bottom edge, make sure my finger comes off dry. It is. So that fitting looks like it's going to be okay. We'll go ahead and open up the hot now the same way. Now unfortunately with these push-pull style fittings, you can't really open them and close them slowly. So we're just going to have to push this closed and watch for leaks. There we go. Give it a few seconds of time, and then we'll do the same test where I run my finger along the bottom edge of it and just make sure that it comes away dry. And my fingers are staying dry, so both of those fittings look like they're okay. Alright, with the faucet fully installed, it's really tempting to reach up here and flip it on to test it, but the instructions say that before you do that, you should remove the aerator that's here in the end of the nozzle. And they do that because there's a possibility that since you open the plumbing, there might be a little bit of debris that gets into the lines, and you don't want that to clog this up. So it comes with this little tool here. You use this to unscrew this little aerator, and make sure you do this over a sink that has a stopper in the drain, because there are little parts that are about to come out of this and they are easy to lose. So I'm doing it over the side that's got my stopper in it. There we go, that's been completely removed. And now I can turn on the faucet and see how it works. Woo! It works terribly. It leaks all over the place. Let me pause here to jump in and say that I really should have made sure that all the fittings on the faucet were tight before I even started the installation, but I didn't. And I'm leaving this mistake in here on purpose because it's a super common mistake. And in case this happens to you, I don't want you to panic if when you first turn on your faucet it leaks from this joint here or even this joint down here. If that happens, just turn the water back off and double check to make sure that everything's nice and tight. That should take care of any leaks that you have. All right. Let's get back to the video after I took care of the leaks that I had. We can put this back in and pull the nozzle and see what we think. Hey. All right, we've let the water flow for a little bit and made sure that the lines are nice and clear. We'll go ahead and put this aerator back in using the tool again. And then we should be good for a final test and the faucet should work just fine. Couple final things to test. Make sure that all the different settings on your faucet work properly. This one has two, kind of a spraying like that and then a single stream like this. And then also make sure that it works both all the way hot and all the way cold. This is all the way on its hottest setting and that is quite warm. And if we move it all the way to its coldest setting, yep, the water is immediately getting cold. And kind of halfway in the middle is nice and warm. One final check after you've let the faucet flow for a few minutes is to come down and check to make sure neither of these fittings are leaking. The easiest way is just to run your finger along the bottom side of it. That's the cold side and my finger comes away dry. Here's the warm side and again my fingers are coming away dry. So these are not leaking. We're good to go ahead and put everything back in our cabinet. All right, well, this faucet's installed and tested and everything's working fine. I hope you've enjoyed learning how easy it is to do a nice upgrade for your home like this. Swapping a faucet is not a difficult job, but there are a few things to watch out for, and hopefully I've been able to help kind of make that a little bit less mysterious for you in this video so that you can tackle this project on your own. Hey, if you've enjoyed this video, you can let me know about that with a thumbs up down below. And if you'd like to see more content like this, you can always think about subscribing, but there's never any pressure from me, of course. And as always, thank you very, very much for watching. I have another hot that this is and I will point out where and what and why and how and through and blue and to and zoo. My legs are falling asleep. Ow! Up here that is held down tight with these Phillips screws. Whoops, dropped my screwdriver almost on my face. Now in order to completely remove, ow, that screw just hit me in the head.